Hey there! There's some questions that only a bar grader can definitively answer for you. Like, what do you want out of my life? Well, I'm former bar grader Jay Bijlani, and I can answer that when it comes to the bar exam. But today, I'm going to focus on one common area of question. It's the truth about rule memorization. What rules, if any, do I need to memorize verbatim? If this is a burning question you have, please like this video so I know it's relevant to your concerns, and subscribe to the Esquired Bar channel and turn on your notifications to see more. So you're gearing up for the bar exam, armed with mountains of prep material and drowning in a sea of rules. Have the big bar companies indoctrinated you to believe that you need to memorize all that doctrine? What subliminal messages are you getting by being tortured with long and dry substantive law lectures? What are they saying to you when they deliver that Everest-like stack of books? They're basically telling you, here, have at it, remember it all. Talk about overwhelming. But let me tell you something. You are not a robot. Be okay with not remembering it all. So if you can't memorize every bit of law, what should you memorize to get a passing score on your essays and to get more of those MBE questions right? It was only when I got in the room as a bar grader that it became very apparent that there's actually a clear-cut answer to this. But first, let's get something out of the way. When you are at the exam and you can't recall the precise keywords or buzzwords of the rule, it is important to not waste time conjuring it up. It also does not make sense to ignore your gut, knowing that there's some legal principle that's relevant. Then what do? Be a lawyer. Be a lawyer on the spot. Don't panic and run down the aisle screaming, "I'm a covenant running with the land." Fake it till you make it. Rely on what you know about that area of law. After all, you spent all that time making sense of the law before you sat to memorize it, didn't you? Go to that common sense space. Then think of something that sounds authoritative while showcasing your understanding of that blurry rule. But what can you do now to reduce those deer in the headlights moments while still acknowledging that you can't remember it all? Spend your time memorizing those rule buzzwords that most other bar takers will know well. There's a simple hierarchy of rules to remember. Think about how frequently that rule would pass before the bar grader's eyes, or how frequently you saw the rule appear on the MBE. Now let's tackle the million-dollar question. What are the priority rules to memorize? First things first. Memorize those golden nuggets, the buzzwords that everyone knows. We're talking about the essentials, all the rules of professional responsibility. Have you met a California bar exam without PR? Have you seen how they've tested on every corner of the subject over the years? Be prepared. Also of top priority are all the rules of the most frequently tested doctrines within each subject, the bread and butter of each subject, like negligence in torts, and the heavy hitters like personal jurisdiction and subject matter jurisdiction in civil procedure. Homicide within crimes. You get the picture. The next order of priority, the second category of most important rules to memorize, are all the general buzzwords of less frequently tested doctrines. Think of those smaller issues as the B-list celebrities of the legal world. They may not be headlining every show, but they still make an appearance from time to time. You want to remember the main rules associated with those issues. For example, the general rule of the president's power as chief executive within constitutional law. The general rule of the excuse of insecurity within contracts. Wait, what? They've tested those? Yes, they're the not-so-common rules, the ones that might not come up as often, but are still worth knowing. The lowest priority of rules to memorize are those specific rules, the elaborations of less frequently tested doctrines. Do you remember the black-letter test for assessing the legitimacy of an executive act within the president's power as chief executive within con law? No, don't worry. Neither do 9 out of 10 of your colleagues who are taking the bar. When it comes to more obscure rules and the analyses that depend on them, it is critical to stay calm and either let the relevant rules you do remember guide you, or come up with language that sounds like it fits with the rationale of the doctrine. Let's put it all together now in an example of what I mean. Let's say that you're trying to answer a con law essay question on the bar that deals with whether an executive order issued by the President of the United States is within his authority under the U.S. Constitution. Specifically, the order says, in pertinent part, that the Secretary of Homeland Security can require businesses to produce the personal and financial records of their customers to the FBI without a warrant. The facts also provide that the President previously proposed to Congress that they enact legislation authorizing the same, but Congress rejected the proposal. Where do you begin? Well, you always start with the legal issue at hand. What kind of problem is this? The separation of powers doctrine. Why? Because when the President issues an executive order, what is he trying to do? He's creating a law which is very questionable, as that role belongs to Congress, which has the power to legislate. The President is supposed to execute the law, not create it. We know that separation of powers doesn't come up very often on the bar exam essays. It's not an A-list issue, so when it comes to memorizing the rules under this issue during your preparation, you know that you didn't have to remember all of them verbatim. It's a B-list, small issue, so at best you may remember the most general rule of that doctrine. And what is that? Under the separation of powers doctrine, Congress has the power to legislate, and the President must source his power to act from either Congress's delegation of its power or from the U.S. Constitution itself. Under the President's constitutional power as the chief executive, the President must faithfully execute the laws promulgated by the legislative branch. Well, after participating in rigorous calibration sessions, your bar grader knows that that's about as much most bar takers would be able to remember on that. Therefore, for the most part, if you were able to remember that much rule, and you immersed yourself in the facts given to you, you would have enough information to provide just as much of a decent analysis as the person frantically typing next to you. Given that rule, you could have had, here, Congress did not exercise its power to legislate because when they were previously approached by the President to enact a law, they rejected his proposal to require businesses to produce the personal and financial records of their customers to the FBI without a warrant. By the same token, Congress did not delegate its power to the President when they outright rejected his proposal of the same. Additionally, the President could not source his power from the U.S. Constitution itself through his power as the chief executive because he would not be faithfully executing law passed by Congress when they were clear they did not want him to allow the Secretary of Homeland Security to require businesses to produce the customer records to the FBI without a warrant. Therefore, the order was not within his authority under the U.S. Constitution. What do you think? Not bad for only being able to recall the basic rule. Now, if you were to dig into the specific rules on assessing the legitimacy of an executive act, like an executive order, you would have had something like this. An executive act would be perceived to be most legitimate if Congress took the same position on the issue and the executive act relates to foreign affairs as opposed to domestic affairs. The Executive Act would have had a lower level of legitimacy if the Congress was silent on the same issue, but more so if it related to foreign affairs rather than domestic affairs. Finally, according to the President's power is at its lowest ebb if Congress took the opposite position on the issue, especially if it relates to domestic affairs. Yikes! Who remembers that specifically super test from the 1952 Youngstown Sheet Test when I Love Lucy was in season 2? Is that really fair game on the bar exam? It sure is. Now, but if you had that set of rules or something that you've made up that sounds like it, it would make a positive impression on the bar grader. However, as you can see, you could have had a solid analysis even without it. Now, if you had these specific rules and only the rules without a true analysis, a weaving of those rules with the specific facts, your answer would have been as useful as Vitamita Vegemin. It's but only one issue of several on essays on the exam anyway. So with so many rules that are more common, why would you use your mental capacity on this rule? When it comes to memorization, remembering the buzzwords of all the rules for A-list issues and general rules for more B-list issues will get you more sufficient analytical traction on more issues on the essay portion of the bar. So it's not a great idea to cram in every last rule elaboration that is testable. What about the MBE, you say? How can I get away with this when the MBE tests on very specific rules? Of course, nowhere do I say that you can do away with memorization altogether. But on the MBE, the same hierarchy of memorizing rules applies. The same issues that are commonly tested on essays are the same ones commonly tested on the MBE. The same issues that are less frequently tested on essays are the same ones less frequently tested on the MBE. As for the lowest category of rules that I described, those specific rules of the less common doctrines, you are often given context clues of the obscure rule implicated by the correct answer choice in one of two places. First, the answer choice will often contain fragments of rule buzzwords, which are intentionally placed there to refresh your recollection of that pesky rule. Another place is in the fact pattern itself. Just as with the essay example I gave you, you can pick up details from the MBE stem that would lead you right into the house of the rule. For example, if the NCBE really wanted to test your understanding of whether a president could constitutionally issue an executive order using the Youngstown sheet test, they would likely give you a clue in the facts, just like the State Bar had done on the essay. Congress rejected the same proposal. Do you see how that fact would have triggered that faint rule in the back of your mind about something Congress specifically opposes what the president does? Oh, right, I can't remember exactly, but it's all about separation of powers and that rule about the president faithfully executing the law but really isn't if he's trying to make a law that Congress had already rejected. Oh, okay, wow, I can answer this MBE question. You see, the good news with the MBE is that you don't have to articulate rules on paper for someone to read. Therefore, so long as you know of that specific rule and how it plays out, then you still should be able to narrow it down to the best answer choice because it fits within the context and the rationale of the rule surrounding it. If you found this helpful, please like and subscribe, as I will be posting more on the Esquired Bar channel. So there you have it, the inside scoop on the rule memorization straight from the horse's mouth. Remember, you're only human, and it's okay to not have every rule memorized down to the last comma. Focus on the essentials, stay cool under pressure, and soon enough, you'll be conquering the bar exam like a boss. Now go forth and rule the world.